The NBA and TNT have settled their lawsuit, and Inside the NBA will live on. We have all the details there. Plus, Mike Tyson and Jake Paul brought an enormous audience and buffering issues to Netflix. The Rays stadium deal may be dead, and later we're chatting with a Golden State Warrior. It's Monday, November 18th. I'm your host, Owen Poindexter, and this is Front Office Sports Today. In today's episode, our tuned-in columnist Mike McCarthy breaks down the major NBA TNT settlement, what each side got from it, and why this is both a big win and a tricky situation for ESPN. We're also looking at the state of the Rays stadium deal, Bill Belichick's coaching desires, and later we're chatting with Warriors guard Brandin Podziemski on how he found his place on a team of legend and why he goes to Steph Curry for business advice. First, here are your top headlines. Friday night's Paul vs. Tyson fight was Netflix's first attempt at marquee live sports, and it will be best remembered for both its massive audience, which peaked at 65 million, and the brutal tech issues that affected at least 88,000 of those customers. Although the fight between Paul and Tyson was quite one-sided, the night was still quite the spectacle, and has big implications for Netflix's NFL Christmas broadcasts. More on this coming later in the show with tuned-in columnist Mike McCarthy. Flipping to college sports, Georgia head coach Kirby Smart is not a fan of the new CFP rankings, despite his team likely finding its way back into the top 12 after a win over Tennessee. Smart said of the CFP committee, "I don't know what they're looking for. I wish they could really define the criteria. I wish they could do the eyeball test where they come down here and look at the people we're playing against and look at them. You can't see that stuff on a TV." Despite the harsh words, ESPN still projects the Bulldogs at the number 10 spot in the next round of CFP rankings this Tuesday. Also, I have to point out that define the criteria and do the eyeball test are essentially opposite asks. It's fine to complain, but try to be consistent from one sentence to the next. Over to the world of racing, NASCAR teams Front Row Racing and 23XI, which is owned by Michael Jordan, will be permitted to compete in 2025 as open teams, despite ongoing lawsuits from those teams against NASCAR over an antitrust complaint. As open teams, the groups do not have guaranteed spots or prize money, so they will have to qualify for their cars for every race. Despite that, NASCAR removing the anti-competitive clause from the agreement and allowing them to race period is a win for these two teams. On to the WNBA, the Seattle Storm are conducting an investigation on their coaches for alleged player mistreatment. The Storm have hired a law firm to look into accusations of coaches harassing and bullying players based off their performance. The coaching staff includes former player Noelle Quinn at head coach and assistants Pokey Chapman, Ebony Hoffman, and Perry Huang. Saturday night, Front Office Sports learned that TNT and the NBA had settled their lawsuit. While there will not be a fourth package for TNT as was rumored, fans will be happy to know that Inside the NBA lives to see another day, just in a new home. While they will still be appearing on other Turner properties, Charles, Shaq, Kenny, and Ernie will be found on the ESPN airwaves next season. FOS tuned-in columnist Mike McCarthy has been digging in on this one, and he joins us next. Joined now by Front Office Sports tuned-in columnist Mike McCarthy. Welcome, Mike.
Great to be back, Owen.
Always great to have you. So lots of big news to get to. Let's start with the biggest, I think, which is TNT has a new deal with the NBA, or they settled their lawsuit with the NBA. Now they have a new deal with ESPN, where Inside the NBA will move to ESPN. Break it down for us. What is going on?
It's incredible, Owen. You know, ESPN has been lusting after Charles Barkley and Inside the NBA for 20 years. No matter what cast they tried, no matter who they added to NBA Countdown, it was always viewed as a pale imitation of Inside the NBA. But you know what? When ESPN wants somebody, you know, like they wanted Pat McAfee and they wanted Troy Aikman and Joe Buck, they usually get them. And here we go. Starting in 2025, Inside the NBA is moving to ESPN. In return, TNT is going to get a package of Big 12 college football and college basketball games. And I can't believe I'm even saying this, but Charles Barkley is joining ESPN.
Yeah, wild stuff. And so, I mean, it's so hard to know, like, is this a fair deal? But, like, do these two sides feel somewhat equally weighted when you kind of look at the scale here?
Yeah, you know, Owen, it's tough. I rarely use the expression win-win, but I think it's a win-win here. I think ESPN has wanted Charles and Inside the NBA for so long, and now they finally got him. So I've been talking to some people there; they're over the moon. For TNT, this is a win too. They control editorial for this show. Charles is not going to be an ESPN employee. Kenny's not going to be in. Shaq's not going to be. They all remain under contract to TNT and can do and say whatever they want on the show. So really what we're creating here is another Pat McAfee. I mean, can you imagine, Charles Barkley, who's poked fun at ESPN for 20 years, poking fun at them again on their own airwaves? It's going to be a circus.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of ESPN's like top personalities, it's Stephen A, Pat McAfee. Now we can include Barkley, even though he's still under the employ of TNT. It's kind of a thing now that their biggest people. I mean, they're in some ways bigger than the platform. I mean, maybe that's too strong to say, but they have reached the status where they can say what they want. They can say this, Norby at ESPN is like, he's got to go on air.
Yes.
Or like, we should hire Shams, or, in Stephen A's case, like, I don't know if I'm going to stick around. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll run for president. Like, these people can kind of do what they want. And now they've got another one in Barkley. Is this kind of in the DNA of how ESPN operates now?
No, it isn't. I mean, this is, as you say, it's a very big change. For most of ESPN's 40-year history, the expression was nobody's bigger than the four letters, right? Bill Simmons learned that the hard way. He got the boot. People who, Keith Olbermann, people who thought they were bigger than the four letters, they all ended up getting the boot. But guess what? I think, as you said, the DNA is changing for two reasons. One, I think Jimmy Pitaro and Burke Magnus are much more open to this whole concept of big personalities. And if you want a big personality, they're going to say controversial things. Comes with the territory. Two, Owen, as you and I have pointed out on this podcast before, all of these people have their own independent production companies. So they have a fallback position. They're not pure employees who are at the beck and call of ESPN. They have options. And when you have options, you have power, you have freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. And are there any other elements of this that we should be thinking about with this weird situation where, we've got this signature show that is produced and owned by TNT, but broadcasted by ESPN? Are there any other like weird complications or nuances we should be thinking about here?
It's funny. It's nothing will change really. The show will remain in Atlanta. It will continue to be produced by the same exact production team, which will make Barkley very happy because he's extremely loyal to those people. It will essentially overtake NBA Countdown as the league's premier show. NBA Countdown will become strictly second string. It'll probably be just a regular season show. And other than that, nothing changes except where you watch the show on the dial. So I think fans are going to love it. I mean, I've heard from so many fans who were just terrified that Inside the NBA was going to go away. It's their favorite show. They watch it every year with every week with their family. So, the great news here is that Inside the NBA survives. You'll have to watch it on ESPN and ABC instead of TNT, but it's still a TNT show. Charles and company are still TNT employees. And guess what? TNT is going to look them to use them in other projects. So look for TNT to use Charles in another sports talk show that goes well beyond the NBA. As we know, he loves hockey, golf. He has a million interests besides basketball, NFL. So, Charles is going to be doing a lot more for TNT.
Yeah, it's such an interesting situation. And I think it kind of speaks to that, like, personality can kind of be bigger than the network, where no one's saying like, oh no, like I won't be able to watch the basketball games on TNT. I'm going to have to go to ESPN or Amazon or NBC. But this show of Inside the NBA is like, that's been the big point of tension. Because I think, basketball's basketball. You get, you might like your certain broadcasters or not. But yeah, that quartet of Barkley especially, but also the whole team, Kenny and Shaq and Ernie.
Yeah, the other funny thing here is from a macro standpoint, nobody ever does this, but let's give a shout out to David Zaslav. Everybody thought the WBD chief was completely crazy when he decided to sue his own league partner. But you know what? He saved face. Inside the NBA survives. He's getting international game rights to 100 games, that elusive fourth package that, I've been hyping about for months. So, he came out of this pretty good. For a guy who gets, really trashed all the time, he went in there and he did the unthinkable, which is he sued a league partner, and, he comes out of it smelling like a rose.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's hop over to another major force in the media, that being Netflix. So they had their very hyped and The fight, you could get differing opinions on whether or not it delivered, but the numbers certainly delivered. So Jake Paul, Mike Tyson happened on Saturday, and according to Netflix, 60 million households tuned in. Put that number in perspective if you can for us.
That's incredible. I mean, 60 million households worldwide, peaking at 65 million. If you were to estimate the viewers, I'm thinking that this thing probably drew a Super Bowl level audience of 100 million or above. Of course, those numbers are a little wonky. People are already taking shots at them. How did they come up with them? What is Nielsen's role in all this? But still, it was a staggering number. And it's just a tribute to the enduring appeal of Iron Mike and the enduring appeal of boxing, the sweet science. I wrote in the column the other day. I mean, the 80s and 90s, me and my brothers and friends would sit around and watch, Tyson, Spinks, Hagler, Hearns, Sugar Ray. We love these fights, but boxing has never been able to get out of its own way because it's so corrupt. But if you give them a fight that they want, and everybody wanted to see Mike Tyson again, they're going to tune in. On the other hand, I don't want to overhype this. Netflix didn't charge anybody. So if you're a Netflix subscriber, you got the fight for free. It wasn't like they were charging you $100 pay-per-view or something like that. And of course, technically it was a technical knockout. They were pilloried rightly for all the buffering and the freezing and the technical issues. It came off very amateurish. And, if I'm Netflix and the NFL, I'm worried because in 6 weeks from now, Owen, Netflix is supposed to show its first NFL doubleheader on Christmas Day. And let me tell you something. If Patrick Mahomes is charging down the field and that screen buffers or freezes, you're going to have NFL fans go berserk. It'll make the Heidi game, look like a joke.
Right. And this is, these are issues that sports watchers are not used to dealing with. We're well past the age of, you smack the TV and play with the antennas and do what you have to do. So, yeah, if Netflix shows that they are not capable media partner of just the basic task of showing you what's happening in the game. People aren't going to forgive them.
No, and you know what? The NFL's not going to forgive them. I mean, I know the NFL is greedy and loves money, but the NFL demands A-list productions. They've literally told networks, the announcers they were allowed to use because they demand the best production. And if you got a crappy production from Netflix, you know what I mean? I think it's really up for grabs whether or not they'll ever get another game. So Netflix has really got to get on the case. If I was the NFL, I'd be on their case to make sure everything is buttoned up. And, because a freeze or a buffer or a lag time has so many implications. Think of the gambling implications, right? You're watching the game and your game freezes for a couple of minutes. Now you're a couple of minutes behind the real action.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've probably had that experience. I've had this when I'm streaming a game, but somehow I see the score somewhere else and all of a sudden the score changes and you're like, wait, that's not the score in the game. And then a minute later, someone scores a touchdown, scores a goal or whatever. That's, and then in a gambling world where it's, people are constantly placing prop bets and whatever, second half stuff. And it's you need to be pretty up to the second.
Yeah.
Especially when someone else or someone on social media might say be commenting on some part of the game you haven't even seen yet. So,
and here's the other thing: Netflix is not starting with some lower tier London game, the Jaguars versus the Panthers or something. This is Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs playing the Steelers. That's the first game everybody's going to stream on Christmas Day, so they better be ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, ready as always. Thanks so much for joining us on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Bill Belichick wants to get back on the sidelines, according to a report from The Athletic, and it's likely there will be a job out there for him. That's for a few reasons. One is that he's arguably the best ever to do the job, so that's a good place to start. The second is that there are likely to be a few open job spots for him. The Cowboys, for one, seem destined to move on from Mike McCarthy. The Jets will be in the market, and the Panthers' head coaching job has similar longevity to the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts. The third reason is that Belichick has successfully reintroduced himself through the media. By the time his Patriots tenure ended, Belichick was seen by many as an irascible old man who had lost touch and couldn't put together a winning team without Brady. Through his regular appearances on ESPN and elsewhere, Belichick has shown that he's still a very sharp analyst and also that he's got a certain charm. Critiquing play calling and 5 minute media hits is not the same job as being head coach of an NFL team, but it's a way to stay connected to the game and remind people that you still have a good head on your shoulders. And in some cases, it's enough of an audition without the coaching history. JJ Redick is now coach of the Lakers because he proved himself as a TV analyst and LeBron's podcast co host. If someone like Mark Messier, Jamal Crawford, or Trevor May wants to get into coaching, their media lives will be as much of a factor as their playing careers. Belichick doesn't need to prove himself, obviously, but an NFL season of doing media has perked up his national image. Over to baseball. The Tampa Bay Rays stadium plans survived a hurricane, but they might not survive the election, according to the Tampa Bay Times. Two new Pinellas County supervisors are skeptical of the deal that would have the city and county cover close to half of a planned $1.5 billion stadium. The county had agreed to cover $312.5 million, but to do that, they have to authorize bonds, and the new regime seems unwilling to do that. Now the Rays are saying the deal is likely dead. Does that mean they're relocating? Hard to say at this point, but we should be clear on one thing. They don't have to. They could simply keep playing at Tropicana Field after it's repaired. They could find other ways to cover the county money. If this is a market they want to stay in, they absolutely can. And that might mean an extra year or two at Tropicana. Some teams cover the cost of their own stadiums or arenas, and they've managed to stay in business. The Rays could make that choice, but they'll likely go somewhere that gives them the public money they're looking for. As for the two new supervisors that seem to have turned this from a 5-2 vote in favor of the deal to a potential 4-3 vote against, they may have perfectly valid reasons for thinking this is a bad use of funds. Economists across the country would agree. However, one of them, Chris Latvala, is saying crazy things publicly about why he doesn't like the bond, which is that he's mad at the Rays for going to a neighboring county to play next season when the Phillies' low A ballpark was potentially available in Pinellas County. This is despite that ballpark having 2,500 fewer seats and needing substantial upgrades to meet MLBPA standards. And surely it's purely a coincidence that Lavala's father, Jack, recently received a donation from the Phillies to his own political committee. Incidentally, the Phillies are also looking for public assistance for a planned $320 million renovation of that park. Brandin Podziemski placed fifth in the Rookie of the Year voting last year and is now in his sophomore season on a rejuvenated Warriors team. We spoke about what it was like entering the league on a team that still rostered the core of a dynasty, how he's handled the business side of the NBA, and the decision process around entering the NBA draft. Here's our conversation. I'm joined now by Brandin Podziemski of the Golden State Warriors. Welcome, Brandon.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, great to have you on. So you're in your second year as an NBA player. I'd love to just get your thoughts on what it was like entering the league. Did you have some stage fright?
Stage fright of entering the league, no. Entering the team that I played for, yes. Um, just seeing three Hall of Famers at my position, you kind of look at like, hey, where do I fit into this mix? And so it was kind of like, what angle do I take? Do I just kind of play the nice guy and just feel like I'm content with being behind them, or do I kind of try to, push the coach's hand of this is what I bring. This is where I think I can fit. And for me, I just took the aggressive approach and tried to show what I could do, and not change for, who's in front of me, and just keep doing the things that kind of got me there.
And yeah, what kind of response did you get, with that approach with, Steph, Draymond, and Coach Kerr, and the rest of the gang?
Yeah. So with that approach, I really didn't know what kind of response I was going to get, just because, as a person, I didn't know who Steph was, who Draymond was, who Clay was, and Chris was at the time. And so I just was like, I'm gonna try it and see if it works. And it worked. And I think from that I gained a bunch of respect from them, and they kind of understood that I was serious about it too. And I wasn't just another, draft pick that they had that was just gonna be cool with playing in the G League. Um, and so I think from that I got their respect. They knew I kind of was all in with whatever it took to win. And so I think it's been great ever since.
And what would you say the biggest differences are between like the Steph, the Clay, the Draymond we know of, from the outside and, getting to know those guys in person?
Yeah, I think um, from the outside we see them as great basketball players, love to work on their craft. But I think um, each of them have their own kind of passion outside of basketball, which has helped me tremendously as a basketball player, just because, everything I've ever knew was sports, basketball, and that's kind of what's fulfilled, my life. Throughout the course of a day, everything I do is kind of revolved around basketball. And seeing Clay have his obsession with being on the water and his passion for that. Seeing Steph love to be on the golf course, love to be around his family. Um, just seeing that kind of perspective and knowing you can still be really, really good and be a Hall of Fame type player and not have every single one of your thoughts and or actions be, around basketball. And it's okay to, take time off, and it's okay to step away for a little bit and have other priorities in your life. Because I was always under the impression like if you take time away, you lose something. And being around them, seeing their different passions for things has really helped me understand like you can be really good at this thing and also have other things going on in your life that are priorities as well.
Yeah, actually, I was curious about that because like Draymond, I think, has multiple podcasts. Steph's got a production company. Yeah, he's super into golf and a number of other things. Um, if like you were just, is it possible to be on the Warriors and practice with those guys, be in the locker room, and not really know about that stuff? Or is the presence of those other interests, does that kind of make its way into your interactions in the team setting?
Yeah, I think, well, social media is a big thing today. So, if you see Clay on the boat and someone sees him, it's going to be all over social media. Obviously, the Steph stuff with the hole in one he had, with the golf thing. Obviously, him and Clay played against Mahomes and Kelsey, so that was broadcasted. From a social media perspective, Draymond was obviously there too, and so those things that maybe if there wasn't social media you wouldn't know, I think they're just kind of a given. And obviously, you see stuff we talk about in the locker room amongst ourselves, and so it definitely comes up in conversation. But if there wasn't social media, I think you still would know because Clay's passion for being on the water, Steph's passion for being on the golf course is kind of really known now just based off what they talk about.
Hmm. And as I said, you're starting your second year. Do you feel like the business side of the league is still something that is like still to come for you, or is that basically something that's like is present in your life pretty much from the get-go?
It's present. You feel it, you understand it. Going into my rookie year, I didn't know what it was like. Obviously, this offseason, I was in a bunch of trade rumors, being traded for, all stars. And so you not being ever in that situation because college, there's no trades, high school, there's no trades, there's nothing like that where you have to worry about it. And it was one of those things where it's like it's out of your control. And so you only can worry so much. You only can place so much thought on it. And thankfully, I have a great team around me that takes care of those concerns, has the conversations behind the scenes that allow me to just have my focus on my development and getting better. And thankfully, I'm still here with the Warriors. Obviously, seeing what all that went down, I'm a priority here, which is a good feeling as a human being. When you're wanted somewhere, you tend to perform better. Um, and so I think it all worked out. But seeing the business side of things, you can see how it can happen real fast and how you can be from one place to another real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I have to imagine that's can really mess with you if on any day you might get the news that there's like 30 different places where you could be assigned to
Yeah.
work essentially with, there are 11 coworkers and all the coaching staff. Like that would be hard on anyone. Who do you get advice from in terms of like managing, you know, all the business aspects of being a basketball player?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is my little small circle I have, because I know they're always going to give me the truthful answer whether I want to hear it or not. And I know they're not coming from an angle where it could potentially downfall for me and benefit them. They're always kind of looking out for me and my best interest. And so everything they tell me is, based off what's going to help me in the long run and has nothing to do with their personal, success or wishes. Um, and I think that's also something you got to be careful of as in the NBA. You know, everybody wants what's best for them at the end of the day. When push comes to shove, you want what's best for yourself, and that's just human nature. And I think so. You got to be careful of who you ask for advice and who you don't ask for advice. because there's always angles being played. And so I think from my perspective, I try to ask Steph because he's already accomplished so much. Um, Everything you could want as a basketball player, he has. And so for me, when I ask him things, I don't think there's any, agenda or way he's trying to hurt me in the long run because he has all the success in the world. And it's not like I'm taking any of that away from him. And so I think for him, it's been probably him the most I've asked for, um, just because he's been through it all, he's experienced it all, and he's had all the success in the world. And so, you want to ask guys like that.
And just finally, I want to jump back to your college career, or just your experience going from college to the NBA. You were there for 2 years, and you played 2 seasons. In the first one, you didn't get a ton of minutes. In the second, you're a big presence in Santa Clara. Was declaring for the NBA draft a no-brainer once you saw that you were likely to get drafted?
It wasn't. Um, I think going into my Santa Clara year, I didn't really have any buzz to get drafted, and so my initial plan was, a 2-year plan. Obviously, Jalen Williams got drafted that summer that I went to Santa Clara, and he spent 3 years at Santa Clara, and so I just looked at his path and I was like, he was kind of a late bloomer too. And he spent 3 years and he was a number 12 pick. And so my mindset was like, hey, let's do 2 years here. We'd be the same age coming out of college. And hopefully I can get picked at number 12. And so that was just kind of my mindset. I wasn't in a rush to make it. Obviously you want to, right? But I think that was my plan and that was my process. And as time went on through the season and I started playing better, playing against guys that were supposed to get picked, I think really helped me. And so I started seeing buzz around January, February, late second round. And so obviously going to the combine and participating, there's no real consequence for that. And so it just made sense like, hey, if you can get invited to it, why not do it, right? It doesn't hurt you. If anything, it helps you if you want to go back, what you need to work on. And so that was kind of my thing. Entered my name into the draft while, keeping my eligibility just in case after that process I wasn't gonna, be on any draft boards, then I could go back to school. And so I did that. And then, really just through some of the workouts, really kind of just figured I was going to be a first round pick. And it was pretty much a lock through the course or throughout the NBA, just my agent talking to different GMs, stuff like that. And I'd be a first round pick. And once I heard that, that's guaranteed money. And for me, it was just like, if I can get guaranteed money and I can bet on myself, then I'll be in good shape. And so through the workout process, we just tried to work out from everyone that had picks from 10 through 30. We tried to work out as many of those teams because that's just kind of the range I knew I was going to be in. And thankfully, I fell at 19 to the Warriors, and pretty good shape.
Yeah, absolutely. Brandin Podziemski, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Time now for Front Office Sports Tomorrow, where we look ahead to what's coming in the business of sports. We're staying with Golden State, which is hosting the NBA's All-Star Weekend. The NBA is throwing more spaghetti at the wall to try and reinvigorate the All-Star game, and the latest idea is to make it a 3-game tournament. The concept would be to have not 2, but 4 teams. Those 4 would each play once, with the winners moving on to a final game. A committee that includes Steph Curry will provide input on the idea. The big question is whether this will create more excitement and buy-in from the players, because when they're checked out, we've seen what happens. That's it for today. Leave us a rating and review wherever you like to tune in or tell a friend about the show. Feel free to say hi to FOS or to me. I'm Owen Poindexter on most social media platforms. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow.